This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is April 24th, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
My name is Mitch Merman, and I was a member of Hofstra Radio from the fall of 2007 until graduating in 2011.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your stories. If you don't mind, can you tell us some of the shows or programs you worked on?
Sure. Well, I was a sports and news guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I went to Hofstra. I went to Hofstra and, burst my way into RHU to do sports. I dabbled a little bit trying to get involved in the music world. But for me, it was sports or bust. Luckily for me, that opened so many doors to experience so many other things at the station, in the news department, in dealing with politics, and the morning show as well. And then also engineering behind the scenes too. I always love to help out uh, behind the scenes, helping people learn engineering. So I went there for sports, and my time just turned into so much more.
Wow. Did you work on any of the weekend shows or community program shows?
Yeah, I did work with the guys doing Motown records, Frank and Gordon,
Oh, sure.
because it was Sunday, right? So we had to be in for the locker room on Sunday. So I would always have my shift around around when I had to be at the station anyway. So that worked in my favor. But because we were around the station on the weekends, we did have I say we as the sports department, we had so many great relationships with the community volunteers, whether it was Basha or Eileen or Tony and Maureen, Frank and Gordon. It was a really special kind of thing, right? Because something that is maybe lost a little bit in how RHU at that time functioned was the importance of the community volunteers. And I
Mm,
think the sports guys, even though we interrupted their programming on a daily basis sometimes, we were able to interact with them and help them put their shows on the air. And I really think that they felt that at that
mm,
time.
mm. Yeah, I think everybody got to understand the changing mission of the station, and generally they're just really, really nice people. You to get your Boschas and Tony Jacksons and Frank and Gordon; those are such great people, and they love what they do. And I think they understand or came to understand how things were shifting over time.
Absolutely. And they were all so welcoming, right? Because their faces stayed the same, but they saw so many people come in and out, and they could kind of not typecast because that's a negative term, but they
Mm,
could see, similarities from year to year, from training class to training class, and kind of bring people together in that way,
mm,
a little more so than Bruce and Ed and John, who did that on a larger scale. But I think because you were in the control room behind the board with the community volunteers, they could introduce you to people, and you kind of get a feel for how a radio station works in that way. So I think it's really unique. I spent, it felt like every weekend, morning and night,
mhm.
at the station from the time that I was allowed to be there until the time they kicked me out.
Did you have any titles or positions at the station?
Yeah, so I was the sports director. Well, first I was assistant sports director in 2009. I was the technical assistant sports director. And then in 2010, I became sports director. And it by definition had to be the craziest year in the history of WRHU sports. There's not another year that can compare. We didn't know what we were getting into, and here we are, over a decade later, of New York Islanders hockey, and it really is unbelievable. But it didn't start out that way.
Hmm. Well, we'll call that a teaser, and we'll come
Yeah.
back to that a little bit later on. I like that, the foreshadowing. When you were on the air, did you use your own name or did you have any nicknames?
Yeah, I'm just Mitch. I'm always just Mitch. I think I tried a nickname at some point in like an air check, but no, I'm just Mitch.
Understood, understood. So let's go back to the beginning. I always like to know what brought people to the radio station, and if you could also tell us, like, what did the station look like? Do you remember anybody that you met? What did it smell like? What did you feel like when you first showed up at Hofstra Radio?
Yeah, so I was always pinpointing Hofstra in my college search because of WRHU. I actually attended a sports broadcasting camp with Bruce Beck
Mm,
and Ian Eagle when I was had to be 14 years old because that's the timeline. And Jared Greenberg was a counselor at that camp, right?
mhm,
Also at that camp was Scott Miller and Shannon Bennett, which I found out later on, who were 3 years older. So they were seniors when I got there as a freshman, right? So that's kind of how all the timelines come together. But I was at that camp, and something that we were taught at that camp, because at that time all anybody talks about is going to Syracuse for broadcasting, and something that was taught by Ian and Bruce at that time was, hey, you could be a big fish in a small pond. And I never forgot that. I was never interested in going to Syracuse to pursue this dream I had of sportscasting. It was, it was smaller schools where I have an opportunity to be on the air.
mm,
That was always my goal. So I called, my high school's, football and basketball games. I hosted, a TV show on community access radio station with my goatee that wasn't quite, grown in when I was in high
mhm,
school. And all those signs, led me to Hofstra, where, I showed up the first day on campus, for a tour, and, we found our way to the radio station. And it was small but mighty, right? I had actually recently, I had at the time had just come back from Fordham to tour their facilities, and talk about being blown away at that time, right? You didn't know what to expect. Um, I looked at Iona, I looked at Fordham, and ultimately, Hofstra was the right fit for me in terms of being local. I'm not from Long Island, but I'm from New Jersey, and I have a lot of family on Long Island, so
mm,
I
mhm.
wasn't going too far away from home, and looking for opportunities, and we knew that Hofstra broadcast all the games and opportunities, so that's where I wanted to be. And I remember Bruce saying to myself and my mother, like, hey, this is extracurricular, you're going to get your schoolwork done first, and then you're going to do this. um, so he said that. I don't know if he believed it, but he said it.
Did it happen? Did that actually happen?
Yeah, I did well in school, but I found most of my time, within the walls of the radio station.
Yeah.
So, and then I went back. I had gone back for like admitted students day, I guess. And my dad said to Ed, um, you know, th- basically said, he's like, this is your next voice of the Hofstra pride. And Ed like looks at him like with like, okay, yeah, everybody says that, but Ed never forgot that, right? Ed Engels, who interviewed every major sports figure in New York City for decades, and every student that came through Hofstra for years upon years. He repeated that story from rote to the day I graduated, because he never forgot some kid's dad, before that he was even in school and on the air, being like, hey, this is your guy. And I showed up to work every day, every broadcast. I felt I was the first person to sign up for the training class. It certainly felt that way. I'm sure Kathleen, got sick of me the amount of times I would just come into the office and sit around before I was admitted. Um, but it was inviting, so it was an easy place to fit in. It was
Mm,
it was a comfortable place. It wasn't too big. It wasn't too small. It felt just right.
mm, mm. So you did the sports broadcasting camp prior to this when you were in high school. Did you, two questions, I guess. Did you do that more than once? And did that give you a sense of what a college radio station or any radio station would look like?
No, I don't think it gave me any kind of sense. I did the camp the one year, and you caught the bug, and I, I,
Mm,
I did this, public access, for years. In fact, even my first fall at Hofstra, I still went home to New Jersey to call the football games in the fall,
mm.
because I wasn't going to be on the air in the fall, and I wanted to stay fresh, you know. And that was beneficial. I don't know if I do it again personally, but that's a personal thing, not a professional thing, right? But at the time, it was the right decision to stay fresh, so that when I was admitted to the station, I could jump on the air right away. And did I know how it was going to work and function? Not in the least bit, right?
Mm,
Trying to understand the technical aspect. Like, yeah, I knew how to run a camera basically, for a 2 camera football shoot, but in terms of really understanding a board and audio, and really the science that it is, right, to get those levels just right. It
Hmm.
really is an art, and luckily I was able to work on that for my time at Hofstra.
Hmm. So some people I've spoken to who did radio or TV in high school or had access to a station sometimes show up at Hofstra thinking, well, I already know how to do a bunch of stuff. And then there's the training class. So I wonder if you don't mind addressing your expectations in terms of like your skill level. And then what was the training class to you? Like, what was your impression of that?
Well, I walked in there thinking I was, the best, and I was going to ace this thing. I mean, who wouldn't, right? You wanted to come in and be confident, because at that point, it is sort of a competition, right?
Yeah.
You're coming in as a freshman. You want to compete for those broadcasts, and you had a strong, group of upperclassmen, which I, quickly came to grow to know, and really, learn from them. The training class at the time was the largest class, that fall, and there were a lot of community volunteers in that class. Ed Burnett was in that class. Tim Healy was in that class. There's so many people that John and Bruce and Ed really, brought into that particular year, because they sensed that, this thing was growing, that this thing being, the school of communication was really hitting its stride.
Mm,
And RHU, even though it wasn't part of the academic curriculum, there was a lot of interest, right? This was at the beginning of the push of getting rated in the Princeton Review, right? That came while I was in school, right? So people knew Hofstra had a radio station. They knew about the opportunity, but they didn't know how great it was.
mm,
So, everybody came in. There were a couple of upperclassmen and obviously community volunteers, but that was a large freshman class of very talented journalists who wanted to be there. And I think what that set up is a very workman and woman like mentality for that group. We were gonna have fun, right? But we were there to accomplish things, as part of our curriculum, which wasn't part of our degree.
mm,
And I really think that that's what drove so many people in that group. Did we burn out? Yeah, I
mm-hmm,
think we burned
mm-hmm.
out, but that's because when you set your sights really high, you need to be able to manage your expectations. And that's something you learn as an adult, not as a 19 and 20-year old.
Yeah, yeah. So I can't expect you to answer for other people, but I get the impression that a number of people came to Hofstra because of the growing reputation of the radio station, and B, that people were prepared to, as you said, put in the work and set their expectations really high. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I certainly feel that way.
Mm,
I think that a lot of people in that class were geared towards news and sports, and they, as I said, to make it part of their own curriculum in school, and so everybody hit the ground running, and they wanted to find their place, whether in the training class or the day one, they could sign up and kind of find their way on air.
mm, mm. Do you remember any of the other people who were in the class with you? Any of their students?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really big group. Christian Heimel, who lived across the hall from me, became my best friend in college. We were in the training class. He'll tell you that, I'm the one that dragged him there to
Hmm,
sign up. He wasn't sure, what he was going to do, even though he had interest. But I'm the one that dragged him there to sign up, and that started his career. Being with Veronica de Souza, in that class, who I know you've spoken to.
hmm.
One of the brightest people, I've ever worked with, and we were in college. She was way ahead of her time, and I think she's proven that in the professional world. I was in the class with John Santucci too. I believe Marie Betzios. She was in that class. You're talking about, people who really came in and really grew together.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think it's a wonderful group of people. I mean, the names you mentioned there are phenomenal. But it's also a time period where there was before you and a little bit before my time or during my time, the university wasn't quite as invested in the radio station as it came to be, and I think that changed over the first, let's say, 10 years that Bruce was there, and then Ed Ingles comes in, and there's a different emphasis. So I get the sense it's a real nice convergence of forces there. You have these ambitious young people coming in, and the university's putting some real muscle behind the radio station. I think finally.
Yeah, there was some real involvement. Bruce and Ed and John, who was still finding his footing at that point, right? In terms of what he brought to the table to bring in. I took more from John Mullen than I did from any actual professor I had, because
Hmm.
he'd treat you like you were a young colleague of his, and you were
Yeah.
sitting in his office, you know, at 1019, just kind of talking, about what can I do, what can you bring to the table, and Ed loved teaching. He would sit for hours on end. I mean, to be lucky enough to have him listen to my tapes when I was still in high school. I wasn't even through the training class yet. Was a joy, and then to sit with him and do games off the TV, for basketball, and then to sit and do a softball broadcast. I mean, whoa! I mean, who gets to do that? What an experience to have. And he really pushed that. He made it his mission. It it was his lifeblood. At
Hmm.
that time, his kids had come through the school, and it was a different generation. I think he was taking a different approach. He
Hmm.
said that we were going to be the last class, for him. He stayed on for a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
it certainly felt that he now, right? So many years down the line, that you see people reflect. And I think at that time Ed was reflecting on what he had done, and I think he really felt really accomplished. And you know when when we got the Islanders, and none of us knew hockey, but Ed and Barry Landers were best friends, and all of a sudden we're in we're in a classroom watching hockey tapes, and it's Ed and it's Barry, two
Wow.
two Hall of Fame broadcasters,
Yeah. Yeah.
just kind of just showing us how to do it. What do we need to know? What do we need to look for? And it is. I wish everybody knew
Hmm.
that was going to happen, right? Because if everybody knew that something like that was going to happen, we would have been flooded with people to get that experience. But on the flip side, I find myself as one of the lucky few who are able to experience that. If chills, just kind of remembering back, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
it sounds absolutely magical, and I'm kind of kicking myself for never considering this question before, and it might be a little unfair to ask you, but so many people talk about the station now or in recent years, and the amazing equipment and the facilities, and it's just so amazing and beautiful to look at. So there's so many things they can do, and that's a big selling point of the radio station and the university is this modern equipment, and it's better than many commercial stations. But I'm wondering if you can weigh out like the benefits of that modern equipment and a great professional level equipment radio station versus having John Mullen and Ed Ingles and Bruce Avery as your teachers. Like, to you, what's more valuable?
Yeah, I mean, but when I interned, I knew more than the other interns. I knew more than some of the producers.
Hmm.
That turned into a detriment, because I came off as someone who just kind of knew.
Yeah.
It's my biggest regret is that I interned for both New York City sports stations, and like, oh, why do you say that? You wanted to be a sportscaster, but I did a lot of ESPN radio. When Ryan Hurley was, still Michael KZP, sitting in a small booth, above Penn Station, basically, doing that radio show. And then I interned at FAN, the year after, and I kind of knew everything already. So I think that answers one part of your question, that we were so well trained that I was able to walk into a professional workplace, and I exceeded expectations too much,
Hmm.
right? Not
Hmm.
so much, too much. And I don't think I was portrayed as someone who, or came off as someone who, was an eager learning kid, as much as, hey, I'm here to impress.
Right.
And I think I learned from those experiences,
Hmm.
because I did bring them back to the radio station to talk with Bruce and John and Ed and my classmates who were going through the same things at their internships, to kind of talk shop about trying to understand what this was going to be like, when we got to the real world, which happened too quick, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah, I
It,
think I
it's
think that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a fine line with a lot of radio people that I mean, I had experiences in my internships and early jobs where people say, "Oh, here's the new hot shot." And it's like, no, I'm here to learn and I'm here to try but I have big ideas. And so how do you balance that? And that's a hard thing to do, but
It's
you've
an
got
it's an
the
extreme it's an extremely hard thing to do, and it really goes to show how good of how well trained we were, that we were able to jump in. I don't mean to toot, my own horn, of the horn of, the people who I worked with and I graduated with, but I felt that we were extremely prepared,
Mhm.
right? And we graduated into a time, you know, I, it's not fully post financial crisis,
Right.
right? But I
Right.
mean, the difference between graduating in 2008 and graduating in 2011, covering my years in school, it was vast for the media landscape,
Yeah.
right? I walked into a professional world that was expanding, and I was prepared to do that because of my training at RHU.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow, thank you for sharing all that. I know it wasn't on the list of questions, but in hearing your experience and getting out of that, I thought it was worthwhile to explore. But I want to go back again to that training class, and you go through that, and you take the test, and you pass, and then you get on the air, and you've got not a unique situation, but you've got experience being on the air and broadcasting. But now you're getting on the air at the first time at WRIQ. Do you remember your first time on the air, or at least how you felt about getting on the air?
I remember being really excited. I'm pretty sure my first time on the air, I was doing updates for a basketball game, in January. It had to be January, it had to be break, because I just hung around the station the whole time. Um, you know what? Now that I really think about it, I'm pretty sure Mike Leslie, who just became sports director, had like called me like on New Year's or around New Year's, because like he
Hmm.
was on the road for a game, so he was like doing scheduling stuff. And he told me I was going to do updates for this game, and I was super excited. And I just remember calling JMU the Bulldogs, in my update, and someone was like, "Hey, they're not the Bulldogs. You got to know your stuff."
Hmm.
And it's like, okay. um, so that was the first time I was on air. The first game I did two pinch hit games on the road, as a freshman. I went down to Norfolk. Mike and I drove down to ODU. I did color for the last women's basketball game of the year. I'm a freshman,
Hmm.
right? So you're
Hmm.
talking about coming in prepared, right? So I'm a freshman, and I'm coming in, and I'm doing, this final women's basketball game of the year, and going on the road. And we drove down, and I took the bus back with the team. I just remember being, exhausted at the end of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Mike went on to the men's tournament in Richmond. I think he was doing sideline for it. That would make sense. And I took the bus back with the team. Um, and then not long after that, I did a men's lacrosse game when they were good. They were really good. And
Yeah.
I went to Pittsburgh. We went to Robert Morris, and I did that game with Sam Lazier, who was a huge Pittsburgh Penguins fan. They were in the play. Oh, he's from. I think he's from that area originally, and yeah, he was a big Penguins fan. The Penguins were in the playoffs then. So I remember that. I remember Sam went off to watch the game or do something, and I was watching. I was in the hotel. So I was very, very fortunate to get a lot of opportunities early on, and I think that served me well, and I think it reminded me as I went on to become sports director to give other people opportunities,
Yeah.
because you never know when someone's really going to step up. Whether it's because you're down to low staffing levels, or someone shows that they know their stuff,
Yeah.
and so they deserve an opportunity to kind of explore that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, there's a long tradition of upperclassmen and recent graduates helping out the newer students, and it's always nice to hear that and that you acknowledge that. Was there a moment where you thought, okay, I can do this, I'm good at this, or did you feel comfortable pretty much right away being on the air?
It's a really good question. I think, when you're calling a game, you're kind of in the action. So whenever you feel comfortable with the flow and the action, I think you're into it. For me, it was hard to learn how to be a color guy,
Uh-huh.
because I was coming up. I was used to kind of a solo booth, to kind of calling games. So understanding what a play-by-play person needed as a color guy, I really think that was difficult. Um, I think that when I was getting, acknowledged by my peers of doing a good job, that's when I felt, I belong. Um, it took me a long time to get comfortable talking to the coaches. Um, I screwed up an interview with Tom Pecora so bad I pronounced somebody's name wrong that, like, um, I re-recorded the question, like in the
Mm-hmm.
tunnel, like I went back and like laid in the audio, because it was just like I was like, how do you do that, man? It's like I got someone's name on an opposing team so wrong, right? So, it took me a while to get comfortable with the coaches. I think, Simon Ridioff, who's a wonderful coach. He really took a liking to all the RHU guys and girls, and he would give you the time to kind of talk. And I really learned how to talk to coaches and do interviews by talking to him, right? So, the athletic department started coaches shows on their own. So a couple of us got an opportunity to talk to the coaches, on a flip cam, just kind of head on for like 10 minutes. So we did that. I don't remember what year that started. Um, but that was great. And then when I was sports director, doing RHU's coaches show and talking to each in-season coach for 10 to 15 minutes at a time and filling an hour, that was my slot, right?
Mm.
And that was all day, because the interviews weren't live. So we'd line up the interviews in the morning. I think it was Wednesdays. So we'd do one at 10 and 10:30, 10:45 and 11. And I packed the show together to air, in the early afternoon or at noon. But everything, was taped. So doing that, right, I got to feel really comfortable, right? And I got to feel that, oh, they're talking to me, they know me, I'm getting somewhere, right? Once you have that sense of respect from the coaches, it really changed everything for me.
Mm.
Doing news, I did a lot of news, jumping off of sports. I ever feel comfortable reading news? I don't think so, because I always read it as a sports report, right?
Right.
Um, and doing the mornings. I think I felt comfortable doing the mornings right away, just because I was with people who um, love doing morning shows,
Right.
and that was their thing. So I was the third banana to what Victoria Rossi and Matt Napolitano were doing, and Sadiq Faruqi as well, and Christian. Kind of what, because they hosted several shows. I don't think that they probably even overlap some of those days. But just to be part of that, was made it really really easy for me.
Mm. To go back to your comments about being a little unsure about interviewing the coaches and so forth. Was that? Do you think that was nerves or inexperience? And then was it? I think you sort of alluded like it's the repetition that lets you get comfortable with that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it was, inexperience and the nerves kind of combined, and you're locking eye contact like with a grown up, for
Hmm.
lack of a better
Hmm.
term, right? And you want to sound smart, you want to be smart,
And these
and
aren't
I
your average adults. These are coaches. These are serious coaches. They're intense people. So
Yeah,
it's
they
kind of
they could all
intimidating.
be very intense at times, and some of them
Yeah.
gave very short answers. And you were warned by the upperclassmen about this coach did that. Nothing overly negative, right? It's just
Right.
like this
Right.
coach is short, this coach goes kind of long. You have to budget your time a certain way, and also because you're doing a pregame interview, it can't be too long, it can't be too short. So to be able um, to be able to learn how to do that. And I was very fortunate,
Hmm.
Brian. I was very fortunate. I had so many opportunities to get those reps. Not everybody got those opportunities, and I don't, even looking back, all these years, and my career hasn't taken me in an on air track. Um, I still look back and say, wow, I was lucky. I was really lucky.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, to appreciate that and to know what an opportunity that is. Now, you were again talking about opportunities and repetitions. Was this the time period where the Hawk was starting, where there was sort of the alternate web channel where you could get games on the air? Was that
Yeah,
part
so
of it?
the Hawk was up and running. Um, the Hawk was up and running. I believe I don't know what year that it got up and running, but what the Hawk allowed was for more games to be broadcast simultaneously,
Hmm.
which was great because we would have two control rooms, go two studios. Excuse me, too much TV lingo.
Hmm.
Yes, going at the same time. I think when Mike took over, Mike took it upon himself to rename the whole thing the Hofstra Pride Sports Network. Nobody gave us permission to do that. In preparation for our conversation tonight, I did think about the idea that at that time we did a lot of asking for forgiveness instead of asking for permission,
Yep.
as long as no money was being spent.
Right.
So Mike
Understood.
came up with the Hofstra Pride Sports Network, and we created a bunch of drops, and it just kind of worked its way into what we were doing at that time because um, you had RHU, you had the Hawk. We were broadcast. Some of the men's basketball games had to be on 1490 up out of Connecticut, right? When there was too much overlap.
Hmm.
And that was also the infancy of the Hofstra Athletics website broadcasting the games as well. So you had all of that happening, and I think we just decided like we're going to name it this,
Hmm.
and we just went ahead and did it.
I love those stories. That's great. Um, Again, a two-part question here, but I think they sort of go together. The original question is, when did you feel comfortable socially at the station? And then speaking about the sports department and the morning show, often they're considered sort of like fraternities, sororities, their own social groups as well. Is that fair to say?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I think that I think when I got into the sports department, the sports department was getting over having a bad rap of being an isolationist nation.
Hmm.
I think Matt Shortis, who was sports director at that time when I got there, and Kathleen, then Reddington, they both worked really hard individually and as a team, which they have been for a very long time
Hmm.
now, to kind of shed that image. And I think the group that I came in with, we kind of picked up that ball, that we didn't want the sports department to be, oh, those sports guys. We
Yep.
didn't want to we wanted to be part of the station because a lot of us did have larger goals that we could use in the news department, as well as with the morning show teams.
Mm. Um, if we could go back to your mindset at the time you came to Hofstra, I think you've kind of answered this already, but I like to ask it again. When you started at the university and at the radio station, what did you think Hofstra Radio would mean to you at the time, and what did it become?
Yeah, I think it was my singular focus. I didn't really care about, I don't want to say I didn't care about, but I was about getting reps and being on air. The what was happening in the classroom to me was going to really kind of reinforce what I was doing on the air.
Hmm.
We were finding, how different ways that we could do broadcasts and learn. And then you've got this, you got this mission and you've got the classroom and everything's, really interacting together and intertwining. But my goal was to just go to the radio station and stay at the radio station.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I accomplished that goal. Right. You know, um, and I think it's brought me, a lot of the victories that I've been so very fortunate to have, in my career.
Wow. This has been so much fun. I've enjoyed every second of this, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface on your stories. I feel like you've
There,
got
there's there,
more.
there's there, there, there's so many things, but I do want to talk about just how the Islanders made their way,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
I
Let's do
think
it.
I think that this is not to jump on you. Um, it's just such a bizarre thing
Right.
that happened, and it's really all encompassing of what my time as sports director was, because the Islanders came to us, to RHU, in the fall of 2010, but a year earlier the football program was discontinued,
Yeah.
right? So we had spent the summer, the spring, and then into the summer prepping for what was Hofstra's first footballless fall,
Mm.
right? Uh, we focused on not that the school athletic, other fall sports were secondary in our approach, but it became more primary, right? Because you had the soccer teams and field hockey and volleyball as well, right? So
Mm.
we spent, the management team, putting the resources into broadcasting those games, right?
Hmm.
And what it was going to take to pull off those broadcasts and learn those sports and be really knowledgeable about those sports, right? And we had started the school year.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
island, they walked, the gentleman walked into the office. Bruce said, "Hey, I want you to be part of this meeting. The Islanders have come in before. They want us to simulcast their games. We're going to tell them no, but for your management experience, you should be part of this."
Wow.
And I said, "Okay." So, guy from the Islanders comes in. He was a large gentleman. He was wearing a suit, and we sat down in Bruce's office, and he handed us a presentation, which I wish I still have. It was in a drawer at the sports department for a long time, or at least when I graduated. I should have taken it with me. But um, he's like, "Okay, so we've got three scenarios that we want you to do to broadcast the games. Um, these 13 rivalry games that are local, half the season or the whole season." We're like, well, we're not gonna, just simulcast the games, because the previous year that's what Islanders radio was. They did the TV simulcast,
Hmm.
and that's what we thought was being proposed. And he said, no, no, no. He said, we want the students on the games. Charles Wong wants to have the students broadcast the games, and it was silent. It was silent, um, in the room,
Hmm.
because it was like, okay, Mitch, now you get out of here, because now the grown-ups are going to have a conversation about what this is and what this entails. I don't think I left the room right away, but it was shocking, right? So you went from, um, you know the competition to be part of the football crew was always the most intense. Not only did we lose, the football program, but we also lost In the Trenches, which was the show that we were doing on Thursday nights in the fall, where we interacted with all of the teams around the conference. We were not permitted to do that show either, right? So you went from, in the span of less than a year,
Mm.
right? Because football was given their notice after their last game in that November to the following September. Just being like, okay, now here's this unbelievable opportunity, and everyone was really beside themselves that we were going to get this opportunity. And it's just one of those things that like Brian, I can't believe it's still going on.
Yeah.
John can't believe it's still going on.
Yeah.
John says to me every time I see him, Mike Bossy is unfortunately passed away,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he's like, Mike Bossy has my cell phone number. He's like, he calls me. Like I grew up rooting for Mike Bossy.
Yeah.
Like it was such a turn of events that nobody could have expected, and it gave everything new life, or a different life. Again, I do not want to downplay the importance of the Hofstra athletic department to what has been accomplished at RHU. It's a big part of the story, but what happened, that fall, it just took another path. It just took another path.
Yeah. There's so many circumstances and things that happened to put everybody in that room together that you were sitting in. And Bruce and I had a number of conversations over the years, and we've got a few of them recorded. I wish I had recorded all of them, because there's so many details and so many asides that he shared. And John Mullins talked about it. But what an experience just to even be having this conversation. And then, like you said, that moment where, the room goes silent and you say, wait, this might be a real thing. How
Yeah, we
amazing
didn't
that is. And
we,
all the
we
things
just
that
didn't
led to
know.
it. Yeah.
We just didn't know. As far as we knew, it was going to be one game. That's whatever we're going to do the first game. Which was Saturday. The contract was signed on a Friday. The
Yeah.
first game was on Saturday, and then Columbus Day Monday, right, was the second game. So we knew we'd get two games because they weren't going to pull the plug on a on a holiday weekend, right? So we knew we'd get two games, um, and we just really relished an opportunity to go in and do it, and how it was pulled off is still amazing. It took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from a lot of people, from what at that time became a very large sports department, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I think so. When I completed my freshman year and the senior class that graduated, it was a group that was so talented between Matt and Scott and Brett Zoller and AJ Hall and Sam, and I'm going to forget people. I really am. And I apologize for that. But that group, that very talented group, they graduated, and it was left to you know Mike Leslie was given the keys to the car. It's like, here you go, Mike.
Hmm.
Along with John Warner and Stephen Florval was part of that group, and you had a lot of underclassmen bringing up the rear. So we spent really, a year and a half of then building up staff again. And I remember talking to the department when we knew we were going to do this Islanders thing. The room was packed again, right?
Hmm.
So I think that goes back to one of the points you talked about earlier about the life cycles of, this is a 4-year institution. After your training class, you have 3.5 years if you're lucky enough, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Not everybody gets is the opportunity to be in the training class the first go around, right? So maybe you only have 3 years. So the life cycle that is, and even looking back now and saying like, oh, the replenishment, how it all came around, right? In preparation for, nobody knew what that fall was going to be like in a sports department without a football team,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden this wonderful opportunity to work with the NHL really just fell into everyone's lap. And I will tell this story. Bruce would kill me for it, but I don't care. I would tell it anyway. He was at an event. And Stuart Rabinowitz pulled him aside and said, "Congratulations on the Islanders." And we didn't know that the higher ups at the school knew what was going on. we didn't know. And to hear Bruce retell the story, he's like, the president of the university told me that he knows what's going on. So we got to get this right. And we did. They still
Wow.
are.
Wow. Going back to the beginning of our conversation and talking about the all the amazing people that were in your training class and all the energy that came together at that time and the involvement of the university, and you couldn't possibly know at that moment, that the football team's going to go away, and then that this opportunity with the Islanders is going to come up. But it seemed like the right group of people came in together at the right time, and then you had the time to prepare and to learn, and then jump into this unheard of, impossible opportunity for college students to do professional broadcasts for a professional sports team. Like it's just so interesting the way these things came together, and hearing your journey through it, that it seemed like it was all meant to be.
It is a weird thing. You look back, and there was also we had a group of people. I was not one of them, but there was a group of people who really understood hockey. I didn't.
Hmm.
Chris King will attest to that. In fact, when we were celebrating the anniversary, at the beginning of the beginning of the year, we were celebrating. I spoke to someone at the station. Maybe it was 2 years ago. Time flies by, doesn't it, Brian? It feels
I,
like it was yesterday, but it was
uh,
so long ago. And Chris and I were speaking, and I said, Chris, I didn't know what I was doing. And he goes, Mitch, I knew that you didn't know what you were doing. but, but it was my job as the sports director at that time. And, I don't want to use the term I'll say the upperclassman air talent, right? Because there are expectations that come with that if you're able to move your way
right.
through the program, right? There are expectations that you can figure things out. But we had a lot of very talented underclassmen at that point, right? And it was my job to say to our adult leadership that, hey, these people know hockey, they know what they're doing, right? And Anthony Barra and Tom Verdi and Gabe Diamond were those three people who were way more qualified than me to talk about hockey on the radio. And they were not the first people that were um, pulled in,
Hmm.
but they rose to the occasion of it.
Wow.
At that time, that very first year, especially right away in that first fall.
And what an opportunity for you as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, as a manager, to be able to look at that and say, well, here's this opportunity that I want because I'm the upperclassman, but to have the recognition to go, yeah, but these people are going to be good at it and they need an opportunity. That's very interesting to me as well. And I think that's part of the culture of the station that was built up over the generations. I think that's really cool.
For sure. And, Kevin Dexter and Ryan Mayer were also, only a step behind there. And I think they were definitely on the air. I don't know if they were doing color for those games that first year. But they were very involved, in the games, as well as along with all the upperclassmen, right? And not just only we all learned what it was like to produce professionally.
Yeah.
Alex Santiago and Melissa Raff, at that time, they took on the production load, um, that you couldn't do it without. We had to make commitments to make this work, because we didn't know how to balance all of the Hofstra sports commitments and what we were doing for the Islanders. Hofstra Sports wasn't playing um, 7-game Western Canada trips
Right.
on winter break,
Right.
but the Islanders did, right? And we were committed to doing it, right? Um,
and
and it
and you
was,
indicated early on that that you were willing to put in the time and do those things because that was your goal and you knew what you had in mind. But not everybody signed up for that or had that in mind. But then everyone's got to pitch in and figure out a way to make that work, regardless. And the pressure on young people, and obviously it was pulled off. But that's another amazing journey, part of the journey.
yeah. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about the sense of community. Like, we didn't know what we were doing, but we did it together,
Uh-huh.
right? We all, excuse me, we all found that we were like-minded people to go ahead and accomplish those goals, right? Um, and I do want to mention Brian Bowl, who was an unbelievable resource at that time because he was around. He was a student, a graduate student, and working in the athletic department. But he had a relationship with the Islanders people because he took it upon himself to go to those games. We before the Islanders came along, we said, "Oh, we're Hofstra sports people. Like we're not Fordham. We're not covering the pros." And then all of a sudden, we had to go cover the pros. And
Yeah.
Brian, as a student who we knew, and he was a student anymore, but who we knew, to really kind of help make those make us feel comfortable around those locker rooms. I think was really important because it could be daunting being in those locker rooms with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, guys getting off the ice and you don't know what that's like. The most locker room experience I had was talking to a coach like right outside of a locker room. Like the Hofstra players were brought to the podium and they spoke and you asked questions after a game. Like going in a locker room to go gather sound after a team just blew a 2-goal lead late in the third period is a thankless experience.
Yeah.
It's something I'm glad I had.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what prepares you for it.
No, there's no way to prepare for that. There's no way to know how to go talk to professional athletes after a game unless someone, explicitly instructs you or you do it. And that's usually the second one is the way that it goes. That's a tough spot to be in. But I love what you said there. And I feel like I want to put it on a t-shirt or on a banner. We didn't know what we were doing, but we did it together. I feel like that's the subtitle for this whole series and this whole station. We didn't know what we were doing, but we did it together and we figured it out. I think that's a great phrase there. I'm gonna see if I can use that somehow. I love that.
It's true. It's so true, and that's the essence of the college radio experience. I think wherever you go, we as RHU graduates, we're so lucky to have such a wealth of knowledge. Kind of grouping everyone together from Bruce and John and Ed to just put people in the right places to accomplish so many goals in school and then out of school as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of from what I understand, what Ed would do and what John would do is not only teach you for what was necessary at Hofstra Radio, but for your careers, again, whether it's TV or radio or whatever you go into. I feel like there was a lot of prep and good advice and life skills that you picked up along the way.
Yeah, and when I graduated, I was lucky enough to have a job immediately, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, right?
Hmm.
And I was working in a newsroom. I was working in Pixel 11's newsroom. That wasn't the plan, but it's like, okay, this is the start. And Ed's like, when I moved to New York City, I also was a writer in Pixel 11's newsroom because when I showed up and I said I'm a sportscaster, they said we don't have any professional teams here anymore because the Dodgers and the Giants had left. And there weren't the teams that came along in the '70s. So he had to learn how to write news, be a newscaster. Um, and it's like, well, if Ed Ingles can do it, I can do it, right? It's someone who's had confidence in me, and he continues to have confidence in me at that time. And that was the kick I needed to be like, hey, whatever the opportunity is, just take it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice, and you've got the experience and the skills to learn how to adapt and get into a new situation and learn how to thrive. That's amazing stuff.
As I've said a couple of times, I feel very very lucky to have all the opportunities I've had. As a member of RHU, and none of it was planned. None of it was as
Right.
um, expected. And I'm so thankful at kind of everything that was put in front of me, and being able to take advantage of all those opportunities.
Hmm. If I could just edit one word, you mentioned this earlier. I think I'd like to splice out lucky and say fortunate.
Yeah, fortunate. Yeah,
Yeah.
I that's definitely the right word.
Because I think you put in the work and you had the passion for it and the appreciation, and so luck is something that just kind of happens. But I think I think from all these stories and your memories that you earn that fortunate part. And I think that's definitely going to stay with you. It's just amazing. These have been amazing stories, Mitch. I'm so thrilled. I can't wait to go back and listen to this back. So I'm immediately gonna send you more questions.
Okay. Be careful what you wish for.
I'm gonna send you more questions, and I'll talk to you next week, and we'll do more of this, or at least sometime soon. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
We'll do more, Brian. Thank you for the opportunity.